Good morning, everyone. Good morning. All right, that was like 72% of you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So very nicely done. So I'm very excited about getting a chance to spend some time with you this morning. If you've actually suffered through one of my presentations before, let me see a show of hands. Those of you who suffered through. Okay, these are the folks that already have an idea how bizarre this little time is going to be together. The rest of you probably don't know yet, so there's a couple of things about me that you should know before we get started. The first one is this. I take the concepts of leadership and teamwork and having the right mindset and all that good stuff very seriously. I, however, do not take myself too seriously. So is it okay if we lighten up a little bit in here this morning? Okay, good, because we're going to anyway. I just thought it'd be polite if I asked you first. That is, by the way, the first of a lot of questions I'm going to be asking over the course of the morning, because I don't want this to be one of those talking head things where I talk and you fight to remain conscious. Wow. Okay, on the laughter. We'll have to talk about that later. So from time to time, I will ask the obligatory rhetorical question where your job is to quietly look to the ceiling as you ponder the meaning of your life. But much more likely, I'll be asking more participative questions. Now, when I ask participative questions of a group, usually I'll be looking for a live human. What do you think? Okay, thank you to the 4 of you who responded to that one, because that was actually an example of a participative question. Thank you. I clearly caught everyone else off guard. Is that what just happened? Didn't see it coming? So let me tell you how this is going to work. If I ask participative questions and I get a live human response, like I got from 4 people a moment ago, this thing is moving. We are laughing, learning. I'm filling up the wheelbarrow for you with stuff I can promise you you will use the next time you do a presentation, whether it's in front of 3 people or 300 people. If, however, I ask participative questions, I get more of a lethargic response, like I got from everyone but 4 people a moment ago. I find I become more lethargic, start droning on and on. I'm sure there's some court manual I can read from word for 60 minutes. Have you been to that one too? Have you been to that one? Okay. The last thing is, this is kind of a treat for me. I am actually from the metropolitan Atlanta area. I live in Stone Mountain, Georgia, which is not far from here. And you heard in the introduction that Linda said I'm usually all over the place. In fact, my frequent flyer statement with Delta just crossed the 2 million mile mark. Now, I say that, and I say at the same time that most of the work I've done has not been in the South. Most of it has been all over the country. And what I find is interesting is if you tell people you're from the South and you're not in the South, they don't really expect you to speak at a very quick clip. Did y'all know that? They say it takes us like 30 minutes to say hey. And if you've been here a couple of days, you know that's right around accurate. But that's not how it's going to work today. It's going to move very quickly today. You're probably getting some indication of that already from my rate of speech. Are you?
Yes.
That was shallow, but I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Because that court thread is all, that manual thread is looming, isn't it? And you can expect my rate of speech will probably accelerate over the course of the time we have together, because we have a lot to cover and I'm very passionate about it. So if I start speaking so rapidly I begin to lose anyone, just raise your hand and say, hey, Greg, you're going too fast. And then try to keep up. Because I got things to do. I don't know about you folks. Everybody got where I'm coming from?
Yes.
Excellent. So everyone should have in front of them a little workbook. And those of you who are looking at this live stream, hopefully you have your PDF. Your first job of the morning is to write your name on the outside front cover of that little workbook, at which point in time its value will likely go up. Wake me when it's over. Why so many presentations fail and yours don't have to. Actually, Patty, where's Patty? I know she's in the room. So Patty, by the way, who is part of the central nervous system making this happen, we were really working out what the title was going to be, and Patty knows the first draft was probably not the best thing to put in print. But I already told like 3 people, Patty, so if I don't get invited back after this, it's good to see you guys. So the actual title is Why So Many Presentations Suck and Yours Don't Have to. But we're not supposed to put that. Can you take care of that on video? Can we bleep that if we roll it back? Very good. All right. I think it was about presentation fails or something like that. Much more palatable. The fact is, the most important thing a leader, one of the most important things a leader is tasked with doing is getting a message from here to there. That's what our job is. More often than not, we have to get it from here to there. And sometimes that seems like a little distance. Sometimes that seems like a long distance. So here's what I want to ask. I'm going to take a little poll. This is not in the workbook, but I was just wondering, you know, when you think of all the presentations you've been fortunate enough to attend. I'm going to do a little rolling poll here, and I'm going to ask you what percentage of those presentations that you recall would you say were absolutely fantastic presentations? Okay, and we're going to put it on the screen and you're going to see the numbers show up, and I really kind of want you to watch the rest of the room to see what happens here. So of all those presentations, how many of you would say 100% of them were just knock it out of the park presentations? No takers. All right, 90% of them, 9 out of 10 were just killer. Okay, let's go for 80%, 8 out of 10 presentations. Just could not wait to see them again, actually. All right, let's go for 70%. 7 out of 10 presentations, really just 60% of the presentations you've seen, or you would tell everybody, you need to see that one too. Okay, we're at half the presentations you've seen. We have one taker, sir. Very good. And that is 50%. Want to make sure your prescription is good. Make sure that's good. All right. He's in there with me. I appreciate it. 40%, 4 out of 10. Now we're starting to get more hands. Watch this. 30%, 3 out of 10. Look at what is happening in this room. 20%, 10%. Now, I'd be willing to guess, I'm not a big mathematician, but I'm guessing about 2/3 of you, if not 3/4 of you, said something about 40% or lower. Probably 30% or lower. Now, we spend a lot of time listening to people present, don't we? That has got to leave you feeling the way I feel sometimes, which is, you guys could have just emailed me this. Okay, so we're all in the same boat here. So the real question is, why is this the case? Why is it the case? So I want to talk to you a little bit about some things that I would like you to be thinking about when you are developing presentations. Some of us were talking about that earlier, that will maybe get your presentations a little higher up that chain in terms of how people feel about them. So we're going to start with some presentation paradigms. There are some paradigms around presentations that are, I think, sometimes a little bit in the way. Now, we've actually broken the workbook now. We're into the workbook. For those of you who'd like to open up to the, I know it's a highly intimidating piece of documentation, but there we go. Presentation paradigms. Now, I'm pretty big on clip art, and what I found is that there's no real good clip art for a paradigm, so I just went with a paradigms, because it just works. It just works. Oh, let's kill the hate out there. Let's kill the hate, okay? You're going to be using it next week. Don't act like you don't know. All right. So here's some presentation paradigms I would like us to discuss, and we're going to do a little true or false along these, and I'm having you fill in the gaps or fill in those blanks in the inside front cover. Some presentation paradigms that I think are looming large in how people feel about presentations and how they're delivered. So the first paradigm is some topics are just boring. Some topics are just boring. Please fill in are just boring and then circle true or false beneath that. Some presentations are just boring, true or false. Some topics, topics, not presentations. Some topics are boring. All right? The next one is some audiences just won't get it. Some audiences, no matter what you do, they just won't get it, true or false. And the third one is, you really shouldn't get nervous when you give a presentation. True or false? You shouldn't get nervous. True or false? Okay, so let's go back and visit each of these because I want to give you the answers to this little quiz. So the first one is, some topics are just boring. How many of you said true? How many of you said false? The answer is false. There are no boring topics. There are only boring presentations. And perhaps boring presenters. Now, this is an important paradigm for you to dismiss, because if you embrace that a topic is boring, how much energy will you put into it to make it less than boring? In fact, what it really does is it gives us a pass. If people don't like it, well, I had the boring topic. That's why they didn't like it. It's not about the topic. It is about the presenter and the presentation. It could be that the topic was over the head of the folks. Maybe it was insulting their intelligence. Something about that presentation, if it was directed to the right people, was out of kilter. Okay? So here's the next one. Some audiences just won't get it. Some people, no matter what you do, they're just not going to get it. True or false? Let me see your hand. True, if you got true on that one. Okay, so some of you are changing your answers midstream right now, aren't you? That's okay. If you said, actually circle false, let me see a show of hands. There you go. That was false as well. If the audience doesn't get it, it's not the audience's fault. If the audience doesn't get it, it's not their fault. It's our fault. When we have the opportunity to present in front of people, what basically people have done, and you've done it this morning, is you've let me have some of your time. You have gifted me your time. What I do with it should make it meaningful to you. Otherwise, your time will not have been an investment, it will have been an expense. I want your time, just like I want your audience's time, to be an investment, not an expense. Cool? By the way, I'm kind of old school. Sometimes when I say cool, I think people are going to say it back to me. Cool? All right. Number 3, you shouldn't get nervous. You should get nervous. True? Shouldn't get nervous? Okay. How many said false? There you go. This is false. If you don't get at least a little bit nervous, you're not speaking for them. You're speaking for you. I'm going to say that one more time. If you don't feel some measure of butterflies in your stomach when you get up in front of a group of people, and I don't mean stage fright. I mean, everybody know what I mean? I don't know how to describe it. But if you don't feel something, then somehow you're not ready for this. Because how can you stand in front of a group of, I have the opportunity this morning, 100 plus people, and not feel some measure of this needs to work for them? Everybody got it? The key is not dismissing or not having butterflies. It's what I heard a long time ago. It's about making the butterflies fly in formation. And you do that by the way you prepare, not simply because you're speaking. Now that I've said that, I do know folks that are clinically afraid of presenting in front of people. I have a very good friend of mine that just, no matter what you put him in one-on-one situation, incredible. But if there's 5 people in the room, he won't even come to this floor if he thinks he'll even have to sit on the front row. That's a real thing for some people. But you can even move a little bit beyond that if you prepare appropriately. And that's what we're going to talk about to some degree. I want to also talk about this concept of digging a hole. Now, all great presentations, when you start a great presentation, you should dig a hole. Now, what do I mean by digging a hole? I mean that in the first few moments, you should dig this Grand Canyon size hole and shove the audience into it. And they look up and only one person has a rope that will get them out. And guess who it is? You. In other words, you only have a few moments to get people to create a desire for people to want to listen to you. Now, there's some things that I did very intentionally that I'll talk about a little later to do specifically that, but there's a couple of ways that you dig a hole. And we'll talk, and hopefully we'll have a little time for Q&A at the end of this so we can talk about it a little bit more. But a startling statement is one way to dig a hole. Have you ever seen someone just start a speech with something that you, oh my, I can't believe they said that. It is so bizarre that now you can't wait, what? To hear what's about to follow it. Here's another one. Humor. Humor is a great way to dig a hole because people, adults and kids like to have a good time. Now, it says humor, it does not say jokes. Humor, good. Jokes, not so good. Humor, jokes, And here's the main reason. The main reason is that most jokes have a target. And that target is always in the room. Whether you know it or not, that target is always in the room. And it will show up on the evaluation later. You're like, everybody was laughing. I was completely offended by that thing he said. Anybody ever had that experience? Like, I don't even know what they're talking about. Is that my presentation? Humor is better, especially if it is self-directed. Because then you give people a permission to laugh at you. Eventually, if your presentation's good, you can get them to laugh at themselves a little bit too, which is where some of the learning starts happening. But humor, good. Jokes, no. And here's the other one. Asking a question of the audience that you know they can't answer. Now, there are some very intelligent, educated people in this room. To try to find a question to ask you that I know you can't answer or that you're uncertain of the answer for is pretty difficult. But if we're not sure, sometimes it's not whether how I would answer, it's how the rest of the team would answer it. Remember when we were going through that percentage thing to see how many folks, all of a sudden people were looking around the room going, oh, I'm not the only, oh, well, and then most of you, like most of my groups, when I talk to them, are pretty shocked to see that most people are in 30% or below. Most of us think, well, maybe I'm just a harsh critic. No, you're just like everybody else. They suck for the most part, and you've had to suffer through them. We'll talk a little bit more about that. In fact, let me give you an example of how I did digging a hole I was doing some sales training for a group once, and I said, you know, what you see on the screen is kind of an enlarged version of a quarter-inch drill bit. Now, here's what's fascinating to me about quarter-inch drill bits. Hundreds of thousands of these things are sold, either individually or as part of packs, every year in this country. Hundreds of thousands of quarter-inch drill bits are sold every single year. And no one wants a quarter-inch drill bit. Isn't that something? Hundreds of thousands of these things are sold every single year, and no one wants one. Now, everybody feel the whole, for some of you, you know where I'm going, but for some, it's like, where is he going with this? Here's the thing, and this is the case for leadership in your messaging too. People don't want a quarter-inch drill bit, they want a quarter-inch hole. So when you're crafting your speeches or your meetings or your presentations, stop selling the drill bit. They don't want the drill bit. They want the quarter-inch hole. What are you going to solve as a result of them hearing you? Not just what are you going to show them. Very often people talk about the quarter-inch drill bit and people leave the room going, well, I guess that made sense to someone. But if I'm defining the quarter-inch hole, that's more about you than it is about me. Everybody with me? I started a speech that way with a bunch of sales professionals in a very unique sales environment, and they really weren't paying attention up until that point. But when I did that, all eyes were right here, and I had them right here. Actually, I had them right here holding a rope. In fact, one time I did it, it was kind of mean. I actually started, but I didn't tell them why the drill bits were selling. I waited till the end of the speech to tell them. And all throughout the speech, are you going to tell us about that drill bit thing? No, not right now. We got some other things to cover. This is an example of digging a hole. Find a way to get them involved or interested in what you have to say right off the bat. So, let me share with you. By the way, this is kind of a condensed version. I've done this class where it actually is a 2-day class in some cases, where we actually have people bring presentations in and we have people tweak them and all that kind of stuff. So I'm giving you kind of some of the biggies, the best hits of this. 3CQ is also important for you to know. 3CQ. 3CQ stands for 3 critical questions. And no matter the audience you're speaking to, there's 3 critical questions you must answer for every audience if they are going to consider your presentation to be a success for them. 3 critical questions, 3CQ. Now here's the deal. If you miss answering even one of these questions, your ability to present effectively will plummet like a rock off a cliff if you miss even one of them. So 3 simple questions. Now, it doesn't matter whether the person you're talking to is someone you're interviewing with for you want a new job, or whether you're doing a keynote speech at a NACM conference, or whether you're doing a team meeting, doesn't matter. If you don't answer these 3 questions, if you miss even one, what will happen? That's a participative question. If you miss even one, what will happen? You will fail. If you answer all 3, your chances for success go up exponentially. Everybody see what's going on here? Digging a hole. So I'm going to tell you what these 3 questions are. I'm going to have you write them down in your workbook, and then we'll talk about what they are all about. Are you ready? Yes. Okay. The first of the 3 critical questions you must answer for your audience is this question. What? What are you talking about? The second critical question, so what? And the third critical question, any guesses? Now what? What, so what, now what? That's all people want to hear from you. Now, this could take 5 minutes or it could take an hour, depending on the topic. But they want to know what you're talking about, they want to know why they should care, and they want to know what should I be doing with this. So let's break this down a little bit. Let's give you some notes under each of these. When we're talking about what, Basically, this is more kind of a sterile description of whatever you're dealing with. Consider it like a definition or the feature of something. You know, that quarter-inch drill bit may be made of titanium. It has certain coating on it. That's what it is. The first thing that comes to our mind after that is, what's the next question? So what? So why are you talking to me about this? So it is just the sterile description of things. This is where you have to do your research and kind of be a little bit of a textbook scholar about stuff. The second question is, so what? This question is very different because it is about relevance. When you answer this question, you're answering for them why they should care. And this is the benefits part of the conversation. I don't know whether I have anybody here that's ever lived in the sales world before, but there's features and benefits. People don't buy features, they buy benefits. For example, a drill bit is full of features. The quarter-inch hole is the benefit. Everybody with me? That's what they want. Now, how do you know how something's going to be relevant to someone? And this is a participative question. How would you have any idea whether what you're saying is relevant to them? Ask them and research. When? Ahead of time. Well ahead of time. In fact, I try to make it a point that the NACM crew is pretty close to you. There's a lot of coaching you get from Patty and crowd. But there are some of my clients that invite me to speak, and one of the first things I say to them is, I'd like to talk to a couple of people in your organization. And there's actually one person I usually specifically ask to speak to that a lot of folks don't. I said, amongst the people I'd like you to let me speak to, I want you to pick someone that is an absolute enemy of the message I'm going to be presenting. I want to speak to someone who is totally against the idea that they even have to be there that day. Why would I want to speak to that person?
You win them over, you win everybody.
That's exactly right. And by the way, these people aren't just necessarily contrarians by nature. There's a reason some people don't want to go to some stuff. And if I can crack that nut, then, because they're probably not the only person, they're probably the only vocal person. And so I'm actually getting to some other things. Here's the other thing, though, that's really cool. It allows you to do a preemptive strike in the middle of the presentation. So you can say, you know, a lot of people think a lot of this stuff is crap. You know, Peter and I were talking about that a couple of days ago. Well, if he's laying in wait to pull a pin, I just put the pin back in. And by the way, Peter's probably doing this. I sure did tell him. So now I have an advocate versus an enemy in the space. Has anyone ever been in a presentation where you could tell there were people waiting to pull the pin from the grenade? Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Don't run from them. Run toward them. Because even the most contrary person has a point every once in a while. Anybody here ever been the person pulling the pin? I'm just checking. I didn't ask y'all. Okay, thank you for your honesty back there. Thank you very much. Okay. More than one. There you go. All right. Now I'm nervous. All right. No, the butterflies just messed up on me just then. Third question. Now what? Is a call to action. It identifies what the next steps are. In other words, where do we go from here? So you've told me what this thing is, and you've told me why I should care, but I need to know what to do with it. Have you ever been in a presentation where the first two questions were answered pretty well, but the third was not? Yeah, and at the end of the presentation, they'll even say it. Well, that was good, but maybe they'll follow up with something later for us to, because that's the whole point, is some different behavior or some new behavior being introduced. I'll give you a classic example. I don't know if there's any Stephen Covey fans in here. I'm a big Stephen Covey fan. If you've never read any books by Stephen Covey, Stephen, I think he died about 3 years ago. As Stephen with a PH, Covey, C-O-V-E-Y. If you've heard of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, First Things First, Principle-Centered Leadership. In fact, you can grab any Stephen Covey book and your life will be enriched by it, okay? I was a big fan. In fact, I was even a certified trainer for 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And it was really interesting because people loved that class. I loved doing it. But at the end of the class, people were like, they were all dressed up and no place to go. And I think the folks at the Covey Leadership Center understood that. So all of a sudden, Now you have 7 habits for teens and 7 habits for, in other words, these books are now answering the now what part of the question that we're not really A lot of people can take the now what. Most people can figure it out on their own, but other people need a little extra to figure out what's the first step, that next step to take after this message. Okay? So what, so what, and now what? What are the 3 critical questions?
What, so what, now what?
All right. The 12 or 13 of you who didn't participate last time, let's give you a shot. Everyone together. The 3 critical questions are?
What, so what, now what?
You can build your entire presentation around that framework, and it will make your presentations more effective. No matter what the presentation, if you're thinking about interviewing for a job, what is my resume? Right? That's a sterile whatever. So what is why I think I should fit in with where you are. A lot of people don't get the job, though, because they don't do the 3rd step in an interview. When do I start? Most people do the resume, and they do the thing, and they're like, I know they're going to call me. A lot of salespeople never close a sale because they never what? Ask for it. So make sure, even when you're building your career, that you don't just paint a picture for people, but that you tell them, so I start this Monday or next Monday. Has anyone ever interviewed someone that was bold enough to do something like that before, by show of hands? That person leaves an impression on you that the other people don't quite leave. Because if they can't visualize themselves in that space, it's hard for me to do it. All right. So, are we good on 3CQ? Is that usable stuff? Can you see right now where you can use that? All right. So let's talk about something else that makes a lot of presentations fail. And that is understanding that there are 3 different presentation modes to be clear of and to be aware of. Now, they are pretty different one to the next. So let's talk about what they are. The first mode, and what page are we on right now?
4.
Page 4? Okay. Have you noticed how many questions I'm asking you?
Yeah.
Do you know that I pretty much know the answer to all those questions?
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what? Now, here's what's interesting. I said, what page are we on? Almost everyone said 4. I heard 3 voices that said 3. So when I ask what page we're on, that leaves the dignity in place for those folks that may not be on the same page with us. And it's also audience what? Participation. Audience participation doesn't have to be long and drawn out and breakout sessions all the time. Sometimes you can just ask people a question to make sure they're on the same page with you. So the first presentation mode is messenger mode. Now let me tell you what the objectives are. We'll have you fill this in. I believe we're filling this in on that space. To communicate an idea when you're in messenger mode. To inform. To inspire. Or to announce/introduce. So messenger mode is to communicate an idea, inform, inspire, announce versus introduce. Now, if you see the P and A in your workbook, the P is larger than the A, and the P is the presenter. The A is the audience. The representation is that in this mode, who's doing most of the talking? The presenter, okay? The next mode is instructor mode, a very different mode. It has completely different objectives. The instructor mode has an objective to teach, to coach. It's about skill enhancement. It's also about some measure of practice or verification to confirm that the new skill has actually been adopted. In this case, the P and A are pretty much the same size. What does that indicate? That they're equal in time. Have you ever been to a training class where the P dominated the A? And if you've ever been in that setting, you know how that made you feel. Like, let's do technical training with 3,000 people in the room with PowerPoint slides. Go get them, everybody. Now everybody's going to try to find the IT guy again. I have no idea what they were talking about. Can you just come by just a little while? Because practice and verification are part of it. Imagine trying to teach French as part of the plenary session at NACOM. Now, I haven't been to a lot of NACM conferences. Actually, I've been to 3. But I've been to a lot of conferences where people have virtually tried to teach people how to drive from a lectern with no practice, no verification, no back and forth. Okay? The third mode is the facilitator mode. Facilitator mode has a different set of objectives. Here they are: to draw out ideas, to encourage conversation, to gather information, and to mediate, or to mediate. In this case, which circle is larger? The audience circle is much larger. In other words, in this setting, really the presenter should be doing the least amount of talking. And we'll talk about how that gets messed up sometimes in a few moments. So these 3 modes are the 3 major modes of presentation. And what happens a lot of times is that makes presentations fail is that people are intending to present in one mode, but they're actually activating in a different mode when they're presenting. And it's canceling out. Let's give you some examples of each of these, just to fill this in. I'll give them to you quickly. Messenger mode, by the way, you will all get the most up-to-date version of this presentation too, because there's one that because you got to give NACM the presentation beforehand. Y'all know that, right? You have to give them beforehand. And which was a really interesting thing for me, because I changed my presentations almost the morning of. And so Patty kept sending this email. You're gonna send your presentation, right, Greg? Yeah, I'm gonna send it. So I've actually changed it since the one that you downloaded or uploaded, so I'll make sure you have this. But messenger mode, here's a couple of examples: a keynote address, an ops review, a financial report. Those are pretty much one-way conversations. Maybe a little Q&A there, but for the most part, me to you. Instructor mode, systems training. We talked about that as an example. Language class, driving instruction. Kind of important to make sure people know how to do these things before you turn them loose on society. Facilitator mode, brainstorming, focus groups, panel moderator. These would be facilitator modes. Now, just a moment or two on this facilitator thing, because this one gets messed up a lot. Have you ever seen someone doing a brainstorming session and they have the easel pad up here and the marker? Yeah. By the way, you notice I didn't call it a flip chart. It is an easel pad. You know why you don't call it a flip chart? Because you may be doing a presentation like I was and found out that you had people of Filipino descent in the audience and realized that flip is the F word for some people. Know your audience. I never made that mistake again because that guy did not wait for the evaluation. It's like, I don't think I was invited back. But here's the thing. Got the check. Don't get me wrong, because I got the check early. But was not invited back. That was an important thing. So here's the key. If you ever are in a brainstorming session and you're trying to get ideas from someone or a group of people for something, you should never be the person holding the marker. Because if you're invested in it, you'll edit the list as people give you stuff. And if you've ever seen this before, it's a really funny, actually can be kind of painful. So what are some ideas on how to make the conference, even more powerful? Well, we should have more breakout sessions. Well, look, let's think, because that's going to cost a lot of money. Now, what signal did I just send to the entire group? I don't want any of your ideas. What the group is thinking, why don't you just write the ones up there that you were going to tell us that you wanted us to think about, and we can just move along. So you should pick someone who is not at all invested in what people say to write the ideas, because how many ideas will they put up there? All of them, because they don't care. Their job is just to be the scribe. Have you ever seen a panel discussion? By the way, I'm always nervous about saying this at conferences where I'm not at the whole conference, because I'm thinking I'm going to do something and y'all going to snicker in another session. It's like, ooh, Greg was just talking about that. Don't do that. It's rude. But have you ever seen a panel discussion where the moderator did all the talking? Well, we have this person, this person, this person, this person. They all introduce themselves. And so the first question we have is, how would you handle this when you're dealing with a really difficult person? Now, I'm telling you, this is a great question, folks. Because everyone here knows that when you deal with difficult people and the panelists are just over there going, is he going to throw it to us eventually? And usually it ends up like this. Well, we got time for one more question. One more question. This requires restraint. Because a lot of us like to do this. But in facilitator mode, you have to, your job is to kind of move into much more of a passive mode. You're more of a traffic cop for ideas. What could happen if people are in the wrong mode to their message? What could happen to their message? It could fall flat. Absolutely. And not because the audience is a bad audience or because the presenter doesn't care. It's just if you're not in the right mode, it will actually discount what's going on. By the way, you remember we talked about it's not the audience's fault earlier? Has anyone ever been prepped to speak to a group and part of the prepping you got was, hey, I'm going to tell you right out of the gate, these people, I'm glad you're coming, but don't expect much. Anybody ever heard that before? Let me tell you what they really just said to you. What they really just said is, when I presented to them last, I sucked. So it's okay if you suck too. That's really what they just did. But if the audience is important to us, we will do all the things we need to do to succeed, not for us, but for them. Let's talk about something else here for a moment. Yes, a question.
Real quick.
Question, yes.
Do you recommend doing the facilitator mode when you are leading a team meeting with your subordinate supervisors?
Do you recommend being in facilitator mode when you're running a team meeting? It depends on what the objective is. Because in some cases, you may be switching lanes during your presentation. And by the way, it's a great question because sometimes you need to put your blinker on before you switch lanes. Because if you're in facilitator mode and then you want to try to go into messenger mode, but you didn't tell people that was happening, they'll still stay in facilitator mode and start competing with you. So most good presentations change lanes a little bit from here to there. But depending on what the overall objective is, will determine which lane they're in primarily. Okay, is that helpful? Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about projected presentations. Everybody's familiar with PowerPoint. I'm a Mac person. Anybody else in here Mac folks? I know that Macs are expensive, so they don't let y'all have Macs a lot. But so there's Keynote. Just done my research, I'm telling you. Keynote, Beamer, Prezi, Google presentations. There's all these different presentation tools. Here's probably the most important thing I would have you know about projected presentations. If you require the presentation or the slideshow to do your presentation, you're not ready. Let me say that once again. If you have to have this to speak to the group you're talking to, you're not prepared. It's kind of weird, huh? Greg, you want, and by the way, people will even set you up. They'll even say, I'll email you the presentation. They're not emailing you the presentation, they're emailing you slides. Anybody remember back in the day with the slide carousel? Oh yeah, here's the slides. Oh man. And then they put them in, you don't find out till that day that half of them are upside down, turned the wrong way. And no one blames the person that handed you the carousel. Who's responsible? The presenter is responsible. Anybody here from Philadelphia? Nobody. The city of brotherly love. Yeah. So here's the deal. I've been to, yes. There is some brotherly love in Philadelphia, but you need an address. I'm just telling you. And I learned this from the Philly people. This didn't come from everybody else. Okay. I was doing a keynote presentation for this company that was having their annual meeting. 500 people were in the room, all leaders, and I walk up to the stage. This is back in the day of the overhead projector. Everybody remember the overhead projector with the rocker switch on it? I get up, and they introduce me, and as soon as I say, good afternoon, the lights go out in the hotel. Not in that room, the power goes out in the hotel. The only thing going on is that little emergency light in the corner. So we are sitting in virtual darkness, me and 500 people. And the room, because you know, this is what my mother calls a pregnant moment. Something about to happen right now, but no one knows exactly what it is. So I said to the audience, I said, well, folks, we got two choices. We can either wait for the lights to come back on, which we have absolutely no control over, or we can just go ahead and roll anyway, because I was ready to roll anyway. Which do you want to do? What do you think they said? Let's roll. Did the entire presentation in virtual darkness. As the universe would have it, as soon as I said, thank you, all the lights came back on. It was the most significant ovation I have ever gotten as a speaker. Because there was a message that was sent that this guy didn't just come to read something to us. He actually came to present to us. So that's something in the back of your head. The next time you do a presentation, if for some reason your laptop crashed just before, would you still be able to do it? Because if you're not ready. Does anybody see how I'm ratcheting the pressure up a little bit here for this? But this is what makes them work and what makes them not work. By the way, here's another thing. With PowerPoint slide presentations, let's avoid the slides that are too busy if we can. I'm going to show you a couple of examples. You don't have to acknowledge, but you can either blink Morse code at me if you've seen them before or just gently nod your head. Have you ever seen anything like this? Now, let me tell you why people do this. They do this because it's all their notes. And if I put all my notes up here, I don't have to worry about forgetting anything. But if I'm worried about forgetting something, I'm really not what? Ready. Maybe you've seen this. And you'll notice that Joe, as we track along, he's not the navy blue, but he's kind of and then they'll have a little pointer thing and they're nervous and so the thing is like going all over, you can't track it. Or this. Here's a report from last month. And if you notice where it talks about resources for growth, now what is everyone in the room thinking? I cannot see that. And here's why a lot of us are thinking it, because guess what the presenter says a lot of times? You probably can't see this. So what are all we thinking? Well, why did you put it up there if you know we can't see it? Now, people do this because at their desk, they can see it. But in here, then they have to kind of excuse, and the rest of us are like, that is, okay, whatever. Maybe they'll send it to us later, okay? But there is something you can do in a situation like this, because sometimes reports are important to be able to go over. If you have something really complex like this, you should probably physically hand it to people so they can have it, you can reference it. Here's what you can do though. So everyone sees this particular report. The part of the report I want you to draw your eyes to is right here. Now, in this section of the report, you'll notice the first column has, so let me back up a little bit because I want you to know what just happened. There are two different pictures here. Let me back up one more. So there are two pictures on this screen right now because it's a JPEG. I turned because you can convert, stuff into JPEGs or PDFs. So there's one that is full size, and then there's a second one that's the same size that I cropped down to fit right over this space so you can't see it. So all I do on the next screen is make this more transparent and then put a little border around it. And then I make that section larger. And now I know everybody is looking at exactly the same thing I want them to look at.
That is cool.
Three little slides, but it's very easy to do. As opposed to having people try to manage their way through all that data that you know they're not going to really get, okay? Use smooth transitions to bring information in on the slide or to move from slide to slide. Have you ever heard that thing, you're only supposed to have 8 lines on the slide or 9 lines on the slide? Well, you have to do that because most people put all of them on the slide at the same time. If you bring them in bullet by bullet, you can get away with more because you're not reading ahead of me. Now, you will probably notice that when you go back and look at what Nacum uploaded for the presentation for me, all this stuff is not here on that slide because I did not want you looking at something and reading ahead of me before you get to my presentation. In other words, what I sent you really is digging a hole. In fact, did you look at your workbook? Did you see how much meaningful information was already filled in? None. People always say, Greg, you want to put your workbooks out early? Sure. Well, what if they get ahead? They're not going to get ahead, promise you. But what also is cool about this is that people actually write down the notes that are important to them, not the ones that are important to me. Everyone's workbook in this room will look very different because of what you're looking for. And that's about you, not about me. Everybody got me? So even the workbook is digging a hole. How many times have you seen a 3-inch binder handed to people full of stuff? Everybody got me? Not as good a tactic. Double check the colors of your text. Very often this happens because on my laptop or my desktop it was very easy to see. But when you get in here and you get fluorescent lights and all this other kind of stuff, not so much. And you'll even have people go, oh, right here, you probably can't see that, but it says, and the moment I turn my back and say, you probably can't see that, I know there's 150 people going. And because we're nice to people, when they turn around, then my dignity is put back in check. Practice with the clicker. Now, this clicker is by a company called Q. Now, you will have seen these if you ever go to really big conferences, you know, where the command center is in the back of the room. They have these clickers. This one costs $350. I have 3 of them. Let me tell you why. What do I do for a living? Present. Absolutely. And I used to have a clicker that I bought at Office Depot or somewhere that had about 50-foot range, which is pretty good if you're in this room. But if you're in a room with 3,000 people, all of whom have their cell phones open and Wi-Fi going, you start trying to do this and it doesn't work. Nobody blames. You know, in fact, the people in the back of the room are like, hey, don't look at us. That's his clicker. Because you're responsible when you're in front of the room. I could change the slides here from the second floor. You know how I found out? Because I was in a really big room one time. It didn't move. I'm like, that will never happen again. Why would you spend $300? This is my job. I cannot afford for something not to happen when I press this clicker. Everybody with me? It has to work. So it's not an expense. It's an investment. Okay? By the way, usually, you know, there was a time when these things were like line of sight, but they're not line of sight anymore. So for some reason it doesn't work. You know, don't point it at the screen. Have you ever seen that happen before? And the laptop is like all the way in the back of the room. It's like, eh. Tell stories with pictures more than you tell stories with text when you're doing presentations. Let me give you a quick example here. These 2 pictures are the same picture. It's a bank of microphones. What's different is on the left is what's called a PNG picture file, which stands for, I'll show you in a minute. This one is a JPEG. What's the difference between the 2? Right, the PNG file has a transparent background, which means it matches what I want. The JPEG has this white background, which means it fights everything else on the screen. If you want to know how to find transparent images, just go to Google, type a word, and then space PNG right behind it, then click on the images, and you'll see hundreds of images that have transparent backgrounds. So the reason why a lot of people do white backgrounds all the time is because they use a lot of pictures that have white backgrounds. I suggest you use dark backgrounds because dark backgrounds with lighter text makes you more immune to weird lighting in a room. Another way of saying that is if someone has to turn the lights down to see your presentation is not well built. In fact, in this room, they did something pretty cool. I've had people do this before. See this bank of spotlights? They actually unscrewed this one. Because if it were coming down on the screen, it would wash out the colors even more. Cool? Cool. All right. So let's keep going here because time is a-moving. Videos and presentations. Those are fun. Can they see it is the first question. Have you ever had that happen? Somebody playing a video and it's like on a 19-inch TV in the front of the room And everybody's going, well, maybe they'll send us the file. Can they hear it? Nothing will activate an audience faster than something they can't hear. You will have 150 people, volume, volume. They'll start screaming it from the front of the room. I don't know, there's something about that we just like to do that. I would suggest you run any videos directly from your computer and never from the internet, because the internet is unreliable. Get the video file, embed it in your PowerPoint or your Keynote or whatever it is, so that when you click, it's running from your hard drive. Have you ever seen anyone click and run a video from the internet and that little spinning wheel start? Yeah. That is an eternity, because then they start singing and dancing. Well, as this is coming up, I don't know, it played earlier. I played earlier. Hey, Jessica, what's the deal with this? Now Jessica gets thrown under the bus. Practice opening the video numerous times. Have you ever seen that, where people click, and the video doesn't run, and click, and somehow the universe punishes these people because they give up on it. They're like, well, anyway, what it was going to say is this, and then what happens right after that? The video, well, let's look at the video. Well, you just told us the whole video. Do we have to look at it and hear you describe it? Most people have about 15 minutes in them max. Nowadays, actually, depending on the age of your audience, maybe 5 minutes. You start losing people very quickly. You said 1 minute. That's exactly right. 3 minutes. So here's the deal. If you have a video that's longer than that, I would still say 15 minutes max. Tell the audience what to look for, but dig a hole. In the next video, you're going to see 3 important, critical pieces of why we need to do this particular procedure. And I'll ask you about them after it's over. Now, I don't care whether everyone in the room comes up with a different 3. What do I want to have happen? I want them paying attention to what's going on in the video. Tell them what to look for. Workbooks. Let's do this really quickly. Talked about some of this a minute ago. Professionally prepared. So let's not give people handouts that have been copied so many times that they're starting to go skew. I'm guessing from your laughter you've seen this. They should be up to date. No one should ever say this as a presenter. Well, page 3 is no longer valid as of 3 years ago. Because what is the audience thinking? What, you did not, no one could update it? They should be organized. Ever seen the folders with the pockets on the sides? And you open them and everything falls out. Or someone says, okay, you want to look for the blue one. Look for the blue one that has Greg at the top. Everybody look for the blue one. Look for the blue. And you got like 150 people looking for the blue one. And by the way, they're all blue. So now we're kind of, I don't get it. They should not be intimidating. You know we were talking about the 3-inch binder a few moments ago with all that stuff? Usually there's lots of tabs in that thing. If you have people and you need them to get that much information, give them the empty binder first. And then give them 1 tab of information at a time. Then another tab. That's not intimidating. It also makes me feel like I'm making progress. You give me that whole thing, I'm probably not going to come to the next session. They should be neatly distributed. Did you notice how these workbooks are on the tables when you came in? They're hopefully almost all the same distance from the edge of the table. My presentation began when you sat down. If it looked like I dealt cards, you're thinking, this is going to be wild here. Detailed version can be supplied later. You can give people all the massive stuff later. Don't give it to them in the room because you discount the need to watch you. And by the way, printed power slides usually do not make for good handouts. Let me say that again. Printed PowerPoint slides, you know where we do them and they have little notes on the side? Not a good handout. In fact, I'll say this, and this probably will offend someone. That's lazy. Take the time to create a handout that works in space. You can always give people slides. By the way, if you give them the slides, why do they need to listen to you? They will check out in the middle of your presentation. And by the way, make them workbooks. Give some people stuff to do with the book as they go along. Who's written some notes in your workbook already? Good stuff. Your questions go here. Now, we have about 4.5 minutes. So I want to try to get a little rapid fire. Q&A if anybody, has this, nod at me if you've gotten something that you can actually use. Okay. Any outstanding questions about what we've talked about? Yes, sir.
What do you do about, what advice would you have on pace? Does Kelly steal in here? Kelly has the fastest delivery, those of you who know her,
Yeah.
of anybody I've ever known, and I love it.
Okay.
It grabs attention. But slower speakers I know can catch other people really well.
Yes.
What advice would you have about pacing?
I think if you know that it's going to be a quick pace, you let people know that up front. By the way, did I do that?
Yes.
Had this been a 2-hour program, I probably would not have said that because I knew. But if people know it's going to be fast, it works. I know a guy that I used to travel, he used to be on the speaking circuit. He was a good old country boy. Good old country boy. And he would tell people at the beginning, he said, I'm going to talk so slow, some of you are going to leave, go to the bathroom, I'm going to be in the same sentence. But that's going to be all right. Is that all right with y'all? And everybody was like, that's all right with us. So I think if you set the expectation, it helps. Plus, it's about your style. We talked a little earlier. A lot of people try to teach you to speak like they speak. Learn what your style is, and people will feel that it's genuine, and they'll go from there. Is that helpful? Any other questions? Yes, sir. And then to you.
Do you have any general advice? If most of the presentations I do, I'm not presenting them.
Yes.
It's a two-part question. Second, then would you call these people and tell them that I'm right? So,
Would I call them and tell them? I don't know. It depends on what you said to them.
I'm just saying, I'm building presentations.
Yes.
And the content's being driven by not necessarily what I think is going to be effective, but by what they tell me they want to get across.
Okay.
In a way they want to do it.
Okay. And you're doing it kind of knowing this ain't going to work.
Sometimes.
Okay. Do you have that conversation with them?
Sometimes. It depends on who is.
Well, I know where you're going. Right. Because I want to come back tomorrow is part of that. I get it. That's why I think it's important that there's some type of evaluation process, especially for larger size presentations, because now it doesn't have to be your word. You can now go back and look at the comments and say, let's see how I might be able to help you better with this. Go and make yourself a servant versus a director. Yep. Now, some people are not going to get it, and almost everyone in this room knows someone in your organization that never will, and we just all find out when that person's speaking, well, let's just go, and it's going to suck. Pretty much. Sometimes we just endure it. Yes, sir.
So more and more we're going paperless. There's a lot of incentive not to do paper with a
Yes.
conference.
Right.
From an organizer's perspective.
Yes.
From a presenter's perspective, it's really difficult to integrate electronic materials, participant materials.
Yep.
Any words of wisdom on effectively integrating those electronic materials?
Yeah, so I had that situation came up specifically with NACM because Patty sent me a note that said this is a paperless, conference, and I can read between the lines. I do a lot of conferences. That means NACM also doesn't want to spend the money on printing all the stuff. I get it. But I also know what's important to me. So the note that I sent to Patty was, I know that this is a green conference and it's a paperless conference. Would you mind if I actually footed the bill for the workbooks? Because I know it will enhance the presentation. And Patty was like, well, yeah, if you're paying for them, fine. That's pretty much the response I got. Because there is, until we get to a point where we have, we can electronically write the way we want to, this is invaluable. I had someone come to 2 different conferences of mine with the same organizations, 5 years apart. Someone, we were talking about the 93% rule. Where's the person back there? We're talking about the 93% rule. They found out that I was coming to the conference. They brought the same workbook from 5 years before to show me they still had it. This lives in a place that other things don't. So it's enough for me to make the investment because I know that how you feel about this is going to be based some degree on what you can take away. So if they don't want to, I will do it. Yes, sir.
We all probably have our favorite, whether it's PowerPoint or Prezi or whatever.
Yes.
But my contention is it probably matters less the software you're using and less than what you actually make of it. And like you said, you don't really need it.
So you're going to like and probably dislike this.
One, we actually have to have it to make a huge difference, so we don't use that software.
Well, there's a couple of things. How many of you heard of Prezi before? Okay. So Prezi there's a lot of sizzle in Prezi. And I like it because it's got a lot of sizzle, but it's got too much sizzle. And it distracts, I find it distracts from what I'm trying to do. That's one issue. So I'm very skilled at it, I just don't like to use it. The other reason is because unless you buy the upgraded version of it, Prezi is an online, it's a internet-based application, which means if the internet goes, this goes. So I don't like leaving my fate in the connectivity God's hands. So I think still and this is after 25 years and experimenting with a bunch of them, your presentation should complement what you're doing. It should not overpower what you're doing. Now, there's a lot of salespeople that love Prezi because of the sizzle. But if I'm teaching, I don't want sizzle. I want people to stay with me. Now, I've seen people use PowerPoint and Keynote and totally suck. So there's not, it's the tool. It's not the presentation. So, any other questions? Yes.
Okay. Going back to the beginning.
Yes.
There are no boring topics.
Yes.
And then at the presentation mode, we talked about financial reports.
Yes. Yes.
And I'm sitting there trying in my own mind to figure out how that works with your now what question being answered on the presentation of a financial report.
Yep.
Your call to action is what? Now you know and you're good to go? I mean, is that it?
Well, it depends on what the financial report shows. So now what might
You have to give.
well something now what might be keep up the good work.
All right.
Now what may be that we're doing well in these areas, but we need to shore up in this area. So it is specific to what the report itself generates. And by the way, financial reports are really, they're anything but boring for an organization that is underwater.
Oh, yeah.
Compliance is another one that I get all the time. No one wants to hear about compliance. Okay. Tell them there's jail time associated with it. Who wants to go to jail? That's how I would open a compliance talk. Honestly, that's how I would, who's interested in going to jail? That's digging a hole. It's a startling statement. But behind that is me neither. Let's talk about how we can make sure that doesn't happen. Everybody got me? So if you know where it is, you can take it there and help it out a little bit. Cool? Okay, last thing, gift for you. And this is in your workbook too. You might want to, this is a fun little technological thing. You've seen this where you text stuff. I think this is in your workbook too. If you text the word wake me with no space to 678-264-3656, you will get an automatic response with the link that will send you to some more tips, some things that we were not able to cover in the time that we had together. So that you can, and also this full presentation exactly the way you saw it will be there as well. Cool? Cool. Thank you guys so much for your time. I appreciate it.